All right, so let's start with
Are we on the air?
We are. We're live.
Okay,
No going back now.
good.
Okay. All right. What's your full name?
William Andrew Paton,
And when were you born?
January 13th, 1943,
Where were you born?
Cleveland, Ohio,
Where did your family live?
and Kent, Ohio,
Do you remember the street?
475 Carthage Avenue.
Do you remember your phone number?
It was originally 4205, and then it became Orchard 3 4205, and then it became 330 673 4205.
How would you describe your childhood?
Fantastic.
What kind of activities or common activities did your family have or hobbies?
Oh, father worked in the shop a lot, his basement shop for woodwork and metalwork, and I joined him with that all the time. We traveled as a family. We had a travel trailer and called Tag Along, and we went all over the country with that travel trailer on summer vacations. And that went on for years and years. We did a lot of family things together. We had family in the Burton area, family in the Chesterland area, and it seemed at least twice a month we got together for big family gatherings. Lots of cousins, lots of fun. And I just yesterday delivered the eulogy at my last surviving aunt's memorial service. And all the cousins were together, and she was old and ready to go, and we had a wonderful celebration. And your question teased right into that.
Yeah, very nice. So would they come to your house here in Kent, or would you frequently travel to other local?
All of the above.
Yeah, that's great. So to your dad's job, did he ever speak about his work at Goodyear?
Yeah. The Goodyear was a very positive experience for him. And my recollection is that it was a mandatory thing to get involved in the university. The university wanted him to have some industrial experience in the real world before he came to work in aviation at the university. So this was during the war, and he was able to work at Goodyear in the aircraft industry they were having. And he had a lot of friends there. He liked what he was doing. He had stories about what had gone on there. And my recollection is that Goodyear was a very positive stepping stone for him to get into the academic aviation.
So in aviation, what did you do specifically for Goodyear?
What did he do for Goodyear?
Yeah.
Well, he started out, I understand, as a tool maker. And he had been an industrial arts teacher and in high schools and lots of other things in small high schools around the area. But he was familiar with tools. He loved building things. And I don't know if they started him as that, but part of his duties early on was being a tool maker. But he progressed into writing, I think, the maintenance manual for the Corsair. They were working on that. And I think that's what he put his major time into. He was only there a couple of years, I think.
Right. So he came there a couple of years, then he came to Kent to start the war service training, and then when that ended, he went back for probably about a year before Kent State brought him back full-time at that point. So do you feel that his initial interest in, say, perhaps writing those manuals or led to any of his interest in being a teacher? Do you felt that...
Oh, he was a teacher from the beginning.
Yeah.
He taught in grade school, he taught in high school, up in northeastern Ohio, Geauga County mostly. He was a principal in the Burton High School, or Burton Grade School. So he loved teaching, and that was the thrust of his life. How he got into aviation, I really don't know.
Yeah.
His father, interestingly enough, was a minister. Ended up in Geauga County, but was ministering in a congregational church in North Dakota at the turn of the century. And I think it was 1911 or 1912, he patented an autopilot for a Wright Flyer. And I have the information at home on that.
Really?
This was a country pastor, and how he got an interest in aviation, I have no idea. In all the years that I knew him, I've never talked about flying. But this autopilot was a total brilliant mechanical thing for static stability. And it was an absolute ridiculous disaster for dynamic stability. It was a pendulum. That's the pilot's seat was a pendulum. And when the plane tilted down, the seat moved forward, the elevator was activated to bring the plane level. When the seat moved to the side, the pendulum activated the ailerons to right it. And that worked perfectly in a static situation. But in a dynamic situation, it would have been a disaster. Orville Wright wrote him a letter, I think 1911, telling Reverend Paton that his patent was infringing on the Wright patents and that they must not use it. But Orville never mentioned that it was completely impractical. And I can't understand that, because one of the reasons that Wright succeeded was that they understood dynamic equilibrium.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, what that had to do with Father's in aviation, I don't know. But Father just gravitated to aviation. And I have no other explanation.
Do you feel that Goodyear was his first exposure to aviation properly?
I don't know that. And I can't ask my mother anymore either. I think it was his first work experience around aviation. But when he started looking at airplanes with longing, I have no idea.
So when he was first hired at the university, he was under President Liebrick, and they had a close working relationship with Presidents Bowman and White during the formative years of bringing aviation to the education, collegiate aviation side. Did he talk about his relationship with them, or what those interactions were like during those years?
I remember having very positive feelings for George Bowman when I was a little boy. And that had to come from Father.
Yeah.
The sense I got was that Dr. Bowman was very, very interested in what Father was doing, and they wanted to facilitate what he was doing. So I don't remember frustration around the dinner table with Dr. Bowman at all. Dr. White was much later. What year did Dr. White take over?
Just the 63 or
yes,
62,
yes.
You know what I mean?
And that was right at the time of Father's death.
Yeah.
I remember very positive feelings about the Whites. Their kids were in school with my older brothers, and we knew he was an important man in the university.
Yeah.
But he was a nice human being too, and so I have really good feelings for both of them.
So during that time, through the articles that, or the correspondence and stuff, your dad seemed to be forming this vision that went beyond a year or two down the line. He very much saw Kent State Aviation becoming a formal educational facility, as in the airport and all that. Did you get a feeling that he had big visions for what he was working on?
Yeah, but my sense is that my feeling of his big visions came about because of the tremendous frustration he felt with the people at the airport. There were stumbling blocks to that. And he was very frustrated with that. And I think it was because he wanted to move forward with the vision, and there were these almost insoluble obstacles that got in the way, continued to get in the way.
Yeah.
And he continued to push the obstacles.
Yeah. Do you remember what maybe like some of the bigger obstacles that he was dealing with, some of the bigger hurdles that he tried to clear?
I can't tell you what the details of these are. I do know a name that was particularly difficult for him.
Yeah, and who was that?
Ray Vanderveer.
Yeah.
Lots of frustrating meetings with Ray. Talk around the dinner table. Real frustration. And I have no idea what the frustrations were about. But I know they were heavy duty and very significant.
Yeah. So the Flying Club played a big role in flight training at Kent State before they took over the program in 1966. So your dad was instrumental in its formation and its operation. What memories do you have of the Flying Club in those early years?
Lots of talk about the Flying Club at home.
Yeah.
Lots of enthusiasm about the Flying Club. And I also remember the lawsuit against the Flying Club that I mentioned in the foreword.
Yeah.
That accident ended up with the individual members of the Flying Club having to pay pretty big bucks in those years. And I think Father paid $125, which was a lot of money. I think he was making maybe less than $10,000 a year then. And we were paying on the house, and that was probably more than our house payments. So it wasn't an easy thing. And that was a Flying Club issue.
Yeah. So during that same time with the Flying Club, he also formed the flight team, or at least got the Flying Club involved in the flight team competitions, which eventually led to a formal flight team. Do you have any memories of those specific?
Well, I remember talking about them, him coming home enthusiastic about the bombings they had done. They were dropping, I think, bags of gypsum, what do you call that? Stuff you mix into cement.
Oh, like just like a powdered gypsum, or it was a flour, or usually flour is more common.
Maybe it was flour they were using, but the planes would go over and have to bomb into a circle, and he was really enthusiastic about those things. So I knew those competitions were happening, and landing competitions, and hitting marks when you landed.
Did you ever go and watch any of those practices or competitions?
As a very little boy, I remember seeing that, but I was a very little boy, and later I wasn't involved. I can't remember what years those were, but as a teenager, I never went.
Yeah. It formed just after the war, and the National Intercollegiate Flying Club, as it was, existed, and then when the war started, it paused, and then in 1946 they started it back, and then your dad and I'm assuming, enthusiastic student went to a meeting in Detroit, I think is where it was, which is where the NIFIC, as it was at the time, was, all right, we're getting started again, and so they went up there for this informational meeting, and then it was, full throttle after that for Kent State's involvement.
For how many years?
To this day.
Oh,
the flight team is still in place. They've now gone to national competitions. It's something that I participated in when I was at Kent State. So it's interesting. I didn't realize its roots went back basically to 1946, and it's never stopped really since.
It's curious to me. It's the kind of thing I would have been very interested in going to when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of other things that I didn't do when I was a teenager too. And I don't remember them happening when I was a teenager. I remember them happening when I was a younger kid.
Yeah. Because some of your photos that you shared with us were from pictures I'm assuming he took during the competitions. It may have been down somewhere in Kentucky or Tennessee.
Yeah, when they traveled, I wouldn't have been there.
Yeah. So
I remember them doing that.
Yeah, so the flying club that he started is the oldest surviving student organization at Kent State. And then the flight team can't be much behind that and its involvement. So he was instrumental in starting something that's still going to this day, which is great. So here's a big one. So where was the flying club's airplanes kept? Was that inside of a hangar? Was it outside?
There were always planes in the hangar. And the hangar was frequently pretty crowded. There were always planes outside tied down. And I remember occasionally when we would go flying, I'm sure it was flying club planes we were going in, we would have to get planes out of the hangar. And frequently we would just untie them from the row outside.
So the faculty's early years was a close-knit group. What do you recall about Otterson, Garrett, Tischendorf, sorry. Tischendorf, again, my apologies again, that came in those early years that put this flight program together?
Tischendorf was a boss, and my recollection is that he was a fairly powerful boss, and that occasionally Father chafed a little under what he was ordered to do. Occasionally impeded in things he wanted to do, but by and large, I think they worked very well together. And my sense is that the faculty, not just in aviation, but in the other woodworking and metalworking and pottery, and they were all in the same Van Dusen area, that they really were a team. This was an industrial arts team, and that carried over to Kent State High School. Jerry Elliott and Sam Beidler were part of the university industrial arts department, and they were the industrial arts teachers in the high school, not the university. But the high school was part of the university. So the gatherings of these people happened not infrequently as very positive social events, and I really think they did well. Pete Otterson moved in after we'd been there quite a while, but they were members of our church. They were our neighbors across the next street. I played with his kids. The wives were good, close friends. And the Louis before that, Oliver Louis and his family, I went to school with his daughter. The wives were good friends. Lots of social interactions. So there was a lot of camaraderie in that department. Mr. Horton, I can't remember his first name, was there just a couple of years. And I remember very friendly interactions, but no social interactions with him. There was a student, I think, named John Lilly that was a very early student, is my recollection. I don't know if you found his name, but he and Father were quite good friends early on, and then through the years. John Lilly would come back into our family when he'd be back in town. I'd be very interested in knowing what he was. I know where he lived, on Grant Street, East Grant, or Needham. It was the next street over. And it was kind of an interesting teacher-student relationship that was definitely social, and really a nice thing in a small university with a small program of where people really work together.
Do you have memories of kind of the attitude of the students during this time? Because aviation was still new enough, even post-war. Was there sense of enthusiasm from them, or is there a camaraderie that you kind of remember among the students?
That's a hard question. I certainly didn't relate much with them socially. And when I would go to the shop, we called it, you called it the laboratory in the book.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time there. After school, my school would get out. I lived 2 miles from home. I loved going to the shop. So I would go to the shop and hang around until Father was done. I'd walk to there from school and hang around until he was ready to go home. So I would hear him teaching. I would see the students. When they were working on plane wings and things, I would be wandering around. And it seemed like a group of people that enjoyed working together. And my sense in that shop, laboratory, was that it was a positive place. It was not a place people went for drudgery work. It was a place people went and enjoyed.
Yeah. So speaking of the shop, so was this inside of the heating plant, or was this the plant that was one that was eventually in Van Dusen?
The first one was in the heating plant down behind you. The heating plant had an upper entrance by the Gilvery Hall that had the pool. It was sort of a quadrangle, and around it, the heating plant was on the south side.
Right, off of Terrace Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the road dropped down behind, and that headed toward the new Van Dusen. But before Van Dusen was there, that road dropped down to the bottom level, and that's where the aviation work was. What year did Van Dusen open?
It's a good question. Do you remember?
Oh, wait a minute.
We may be able to research that real quick.
Because my recollections of Father's place of work in the heating plant is really distant.
Yeah.
I was a little boy then, and when they moved in Van Dusen, boy, that was a palace.
Yeah.
And going back, the place was tiny when I see it now. But those early years, it was pretty Spartan, and Father was very
the move
happy.
into Van Dusen was 1950.
Yeah,
It was called the Arts Building initially.
yeah. And in 1950, I was 7. So that was when the department blossomed.
Yeah. Do you remember your dad's reaction to getting that spacious palace?
Oh, that was magnificent. He was all very excited. We were too.
Yeah.
And then it ended up being our hangout.
So the club airplane, since Vanderveer had monopoly on the facilities at the airport, as we understand, it would have to do any heavy maintenance at times on campus, that they would bring the airplanes there. Do you have any memories of them doing airplane work there?
There were always airplanes there. And there would be engines torn down. There'd be airframes completely stripped of their fabric, repairs of the airframes, and then covering with fabric again and doping them. That was almost a universal phenomenon in that shop. Some of them, I think, were not just Flying Club planes. They were planes that my sense was that they bought the planes or were given the planes. And then the students would learn by making them right. And then I think they sold the planes. That was my sense. So they didn't all stay at home. I think it was part of their way of keeping the program going.
Yeah. How did they get the airplanes to and from the airport?
Wings off, of course. And to the airport.
You're back and forth. How would they? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I ever saw it happen, but they certainly were wings off and trucked across town. There was no other way to do it.
How did the students get to and from that airport?
My recollection is that was hard. And I'm not a great authority on this, but I think it was a challenge for some of the students to travel. There weren't many students with cars. And I think there was a lot of cooperation. And I don't think there was any, early on, any university-sponsored way for that to happen. You know better than I, but...
Yeah, the bus service didn't start until 1967.
Yeah.
We found mention of Vanderveer having a bus, but that's it. We found no mention of its use.
And I have no idea.
Yeah. It's the $1 million question, because that airport's enough miles away, you can't walk it.
Can't walk it.
Yeah. Did you or your brothers ever get pilot's licenses or even do any flying them yourselves?
I don't have the data. My brother Bob and Tom both did pilot training, but at Chagrin Falls, because Father's sister was an accountant at Chagrin Falls, and she took no money for her work. She took flying hours for her work. She got her license. Her husband got his license. Tom got his license. Bob, the oldest son, I can't remember if he got his license or not. Neither one of them pursued that. It didn't become a regular thing for them. My brother Jim, now Warren, the third in line, I don't think he took flight training. But I don't know for sure, because Aunt Doris offered us her hours at Chagrin Falls to get our licenses. And then during college, on vacations and such, I went to Chagrin Falls, and I ultimately soloed in a J3, and was building my solo hours and more instruction hours. And I developed a cardiac rhythm problem that, if the FAA had known about, would have completely cut me out of flying. And I decided on my own, when I was in medical school and was still moving slowly, I decided on my own that the FAA was right. So I gave up my pilot training. I loved it. It was what you pilots know what it's like.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to continue, but I made the right decision.
Yeah.
It was a paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia, for those who are interested, that can suddenly hit you in times of excitement, usually, like when you get a sudden downdraft when you're landing.
Yeah.
And when it started, when each episode, I've had maybe 24 episodes in my life, and I haven't had any for 30 years, but when it would hit, my vision would go gray, because my heart output just dropped precipitously. And then the vision would come back. But in flying, when you have that sudden downdraft, that's not when you want to be incapacitated. That's when you want to be at your peak.
Yeah.
And that's why I decided that it was foolish for me to pursue that.
Do you remember your dad learning to fly?
I remember him getting his commercial license, but it was just a single-engine commercial license. Father was a very enthusiastic flyer, not a highly experienced flyer. His logbook does not show all that many hours, but he loved it. And he flew as much as he could, but he didn't have much money to fly, and he didn't have a lot of time to fly. Pete Otterson, on the other hand, was the real pilot in the department.
Do you remember the airport being named for your father, or that news coming to you and your family?
Well, you know the story, I'm sure. Father died at the height of his career, and it was an illness that came on over about a 1-year period, and then he was gone with brain cancer. And sometime thereafter, I think the trustees named the airport after him, and didn't tell anybody, didn't tell Mother. This was all coming to the forefront, and suddenly I guess somebody realized that Mother hadn't been told, and she got told late in this whole process. And I remember her telling me about it with, on the one hand, this tremendous pride, and on the other hand, a little consternation at the university.
Maybe that was the final send-off for dealing with university politics, right? To get lost in the shuffle with that.